Hey everybody, how's it going? My name is Aarik Dorobiala. I am the community manager here at Obsidian Entertainment. Thank you for joining us on this joyous moment where we are streaming Pillars of Eternity with Josh Sawyer himself. So let's all welcome Josh and put your O's up, everyone.
Hi everybody. I just learned how to pronounce Eric's last name.
Yep. People don't know until they hear it. So yeah, we're just gonna go ahead and go through the beginning of the game. Josh is gonna do some commentary while I'll be playing the game. Of course, if you guys have questions for Josh, please feel free. We'll be reading chat, and we'll do our best to answer all your questions as we are able to, as long as chat isn't flying like crazy. So we're just gonna go ahead and get on to it. So
Yeah.
What's up?
Oh yeah, you're right. We're gonna make the game bigger for you guys.
Sweet. Greetings. All right. Where's that last name come from?
Dorobiala, it is originated from Russia.
Oh,
It's like Polish.
Yeah.
sweet.
I didn't ask my dad too much. I just accepted it like my weird spelling of my first name.
Sweet.
I was like, Eric's are spelled with E's? That's
Let's
just
check
weird.
for those outcroppings.
Would they be?
Classic Wolfmer. So what was your strat here with this character? I can't remember. You wanted to build a tank chanter because no one builds tank chanters?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a tank chanter pretty much. He's just a meat shield
Sweet.
and just providing support for the
And
team.
you have Come Sweet, Winds of Death for your passive.
Yeah, and the movement speed.
Oh, no. Cool. Good murder. Are you getting the cues?
Sure.
This is it.
Do Obsidian voice actors get told what their characters are about? Yeah. Yeah, we generally try to give the voice actor... I mean, it depends on the game. On Fallout New Vegas, there were so many characters that it was hard to give context for everyone. But on a game like Pillars of Eternity, where there are far fewer spoken parts, we have a lot more time to establish what each character is about, not only in a general sense, but also to talk about the specifics of a given scene or conversation, or even a line take. Yeah, certain games are very demanding in terms of the voice casting and recording schedules. But Pillars is not like that because it's far fewer lines and far fewer
Right.
characters. So we generally give a lot more context and detail for the voice actors. At least, I think so.
Can you turn that speaker down a little bit, Mikey? I wanted to bleed in.
What a surprise. Sparfle went hunting. At least he left the...
Good old Sparfle.
Sparfle?
Yep,
Are you all...
poor guy.
This is our first scripted interaction, I believe, that you get in the game. And I remember this was
Ambush.
the point where we realized that scripted interactions needed to have sound effects to really sell what was happening. So you have Sparfle like breathing and kind of, shuffling out of the forest and all that stuff. And we found over time the more that we did scripted interactions,
Let's go.
when we do have sound effects as part of them, it really adds a huge amount to the enjoyment of it.
Come on, we have to get back to camp.
By the way, the choice of having Kalisha as your first buddy here is to make sure that you have a tank.
Yeah.
We give you a fighter who's in medium armor to make sure that you had someone that was pretty durable right away, so that if someone came in and made like a wizard with a three con or something like that, they weren't
Worth a look.
hopefully just gonna not get knocked over by a stiff breeze because you have a meat shield there to kind of absorb a lot of hits.
So I always wondered, you get this cool, unique weapon right away, but it's not very good.
Yes.
What is the reason to give you the disappointer right off the bat?
So the disappointer is something that it's a backer item. So there's a backer who specifically wanted the disappointer, and he or she, I can't remember exactly, they said that the disappointer should be, it really should be bad. It should not be something that looks bad but is actually good. They're like, no, it should be genuinely crappy. But I think we had an idea that through enchantment you could make it actually decent if you want to. So
Sure.
we put it in the first area to find. So if you want to use a gun right away, you can, but it's a pretty bad gun. But then later you can enchant it, and you can actually override the bad aspects of it. But it takes some kind of, you have to know that it's there and get it and then keep it. And you have to go through all that stuff for a while. So it's more of like a long-term strategy with it. But yeah, guns, other than the Disappointer, I think it's quite a while before you get guns because they're pretty burly. So we wanted to make sure there was delay on it. But the Disappointer is so bad that it's okay. Oh, nice. Cool. Yeah, actually a tank chanter is pretty good if you just want to sit there for a while and rack up phrases. And then that thing is just a
beast.
Yeah, it's pretty gnarly in this first area.
Yeah, I like just to get the quick phrases, songs, and then.
Yeah, they're a little less powerful now that we put in 3.0. I think it was 3.0. We put summon durations on all those chanters because they were crazy before. It was like, yep, this insane damage dealing meat shield is here.
I think the ivory, like the summon trinkets, those were indefinite as well.
Yeah, the summon trinkets get used a huge amount by a lot of the solo run players. They're just sort of invaluable for distracting and soaking up damage. Yeah, there's a ton of different ways. Eric Fenstermaker spent a lot of time on that conversation with the Glonfothen leader where Hayden is being sort of held prisoner. Just to make sure there were a lot of options based on your character background, your ability scores, your attributes, things like that. Something that we did in Fallout New Vegas as well is try to make the first area of the game respond to almost any choice that the player could make during character creation, so they feel that, like, hey, wow, these things that I did actually have an impact. Oh no, oh Dama.
Get inside.
Say it ain't so.
Run.
Get inside. Now. This cutscene was difficult to do. There are a lot of challenges technically. I think now if we tried to do this cutscene, it would be very easy, but at the time we had pretty primitive cutscene tools, so.
Was it that the amount of VFX was bogging
there's
it down?
There's timing, there's VFX, there's people running, the camera is panning. There's just a lot of things that we didn't have great tools initially to implement, or just timing issues and stuff like that. Oh, you didn't get a...
I didn't get my bow ready.
So now you're going to lose, or what are you going to do?
Sorry, buddy.
Well, you know how that goes. Well,
Yeah.
all right, I guess you're going to
There it is.
burl your way through.
Yeah.
You can lose Hayden. And the thinking with these first two characters is we wanted to, I don't know if we would necessarily do this the same way if we had this to do over again, but the thinking here is that we needed characters to be introduced, but we didn't really want to force a ton of characters on you that you had to manage for a long time.
Yeah.
And we also wanted you to do some wandering on your own. So we wanted to introduce the mechanics of managing multiple characters, but we also wanted you to have a period where you're just by yourself. So we have Kalisha, we have Hayden. We also wanted to show you companions can die and leave. So that's why Kalisha can leave and Hayden can just die in that sequence. And then later on, you get the boys. You get Aloth and Adair. And is it okay to mention tyranny? No. No, it's okay to mention tyranny. Do you guys see yourselves using features of it, like the hovering text and other titles? Yeah, I think certain features for Tyranny make the most sense in Tyranny for its world and its setting and its mechanics. The hover text, though, is something I liked the first time I saw it. I think it's a really great addition to games like this. Certainly a lot of people criticized Pillars for being very, very heavy on lore, especially early on. And there's a lot of exposition and dialogues that can really slow things down. I think we always want games like this to be fairly text heavy, but there is a good point to pacing the text out a little bit better, and those little hovers where you can get a reminder or just a breakdown of a lore entry thing, I think is a really good feature. So something like that I think we would definitely want to use in the future, and I think that there are other features that I think are pretty cool as well.
Give him that tasty meat.
You said after Fallout New Vegas was done, you didn't make a complete play of it.
Yeah.
No, that's not true. I did play all the way through Fallout New Vegas. I didn't play all the way through Fallout New Vegas with every single faction, but I have done a full playthrough of every game that I've been a lead on. So I played all the way through, well, and Icewind Dale 1, which I wasn't a lead on, but I did a full playthrough of Icewind Dale 1, Icewind Dale 2, Neverwinter Nights 2. If you're curious, my character in Neverwinter Nights 2, that end of the game, was a fighter, wizard, eldritch knight, Neverwinter 9, dual-wielding, monkey-gripped, great swords, one that was meteoric iron, the other which was adamantine, and it was very comical.
Wow.
And then, I finished New Vegas. I played through all of the DLCs for New Vegas, and I did a full playthrough of Pillars of Eternity. And with Pillars of Eternity, I believe I did all the bounties.
Right.
I did all the dragons.
slime?
I did the wizard fights. I did all that stuff. Are there any ideas you like and would like to implement from the Divinity original Sin games? Yeah, they have.
Let's go.
I think they have a pretty good system of counters in their game. Like, it's very clear how they use, how different effects will counter each other or influence each other. So if there's a negative status effect going on, you can sort of like use a buff to actually cancel the debuff or the malus, if you prefer that term.
Space Pig.
And you get Space Pig. Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff like that. I mean, the focus really with Divinity is on their multiplayer, which is very, very cool, and that's not really our focus. But I think Divinity does have a lot of cool features in it.
Yep.
Doing a little technical something. Sweet. Cool. Audio mixing. It's fascinating.
Boom, 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 boom. All right.
Witcher 3. I have only played a few hours of Witcher 3. I think it's, from what I've seen of it, it's
That looks weak.
pretty,
Could be a shortcut.
pretty awesome game. The environments are beautiful. I think that writing seems pretty solid. I think that their combat mechanics are really strong. Yeah, and I think that Witcher 3 has built a lot
Fresh air in
on
here.
stuff that people
I think we found an exit.
really enjoyed in the first two Witcher
like a storm
games.
path.
But like I said, I've only played a few hours of it, so everything I saw of it, though, seemed really, really well done. So, have I considered turn-based rather than real-time with pause? For Pillars of Eternity, at least the sort of main titles like this, I think real-time with pause this is kind of the reason why we're doing the game like this. It's meant to be a spiritual successor, and the combat is such a big part of that. Personally, I really like turn-based combat games. I think it would be very cool to make a Pillars of Eternity tactics game that would be just purely focused on like when I say arena combat, I don't really mean literally arenas, but like, it's just set piece encounters, it's turn-based, it's super duper focused. I think a game like that could be really cool. And personally, I would like to work on like a historical or historical fantasy game that has turn-based combat, because I think it's a lot of fun to work on and it's a lot of fun to play.
Yeah.
I'm playing on normal, by the way, guys.
Older robed man.
Facial hair.
Oathbinder, bear witness, and see this man has kept his word true to his last.
Do you guys get annoyed by all the Fallout questions and comments? No, not at all. Obviously, we can't answer all of them, but it's great that I got to work on a game that so many people really are passionate about, and they're still asking questions about. I mean, that's nothing to complain about. Oh, also this cutscene was a huge pain in the ass. There's a lot of weird stuff going on. Yeah, there's screen effects, like full screen effects going on. There are lots of timing issues, lots of camera movement issues. Again, I think doing a scene like that now is probably a lot easier.
So I had a friend play this game, and he was really into Kalisha, like her backstory and everything.
No.
And she had a bunch of purpose. And then this scene happens, and he asks me, he's like, why can't I have her? Like, you guys broken my heart because I instantly fell in love with this character, and you take her away from me.
Yeah, it's like I said, I'm not sure if we would do it the same way. I think there are pros and cons to the idea of like, should we introduce characters? Well, part of it also is that I think the initial idea was that you are the sole survivor of some event that transforms you, and that's what turns you into a watcher. And if you're the sole survivor, it was kind of like, well, does the player play only by themselves at the beginning? Do they have companions with them that are temporary? We also wanted to make sure that if a player, kind of botched and got those guys killed, that they weren't like, oh my god, those are two major characters and they're gone now. So Kalisha and Hayden, we were like, okay, these are basically just temp companions. And that way, if the player botches it or whatever, it doesn't really matter. They can kind of understand how the mechanics work. And then later on, when they get Adair and Aloth and those guys, they'll already understand how the basic mechanics work. Do we have companions and pillars that we're particularly proud of? I don't know. I think everyone has their own sort of, their own sort of favorites and opinions with those characters. I certainly think a character like Durance, he really dives deep into a lot of the philosophical things that have to do with belief and sort of faith in Mogren, which is very cool. I do like Adair a lot for his kind of dry sense of humor. I think a lot of people really enjoy Adair a lot. I had a lot of fun writing Pelagina. Unfortunately, not as many people tend to see Pelagina because she's one of the harder companions to find and get in the game. But I was pretty happy with all of our companions for different reasons.
Well, let's see if I get wrecked here.
Who designed Theos? Theos was primarily designed by Eric Fenstermaker. He came up with the basic concept of the character. I believe he named the character. He came up with the appearance and the backstory of Theos. I think anything that anyone else sort of contributed to Theos was probably just sort of suggestions. So I would say that Eric Fenstermaker is for the most part, responsible for how the character that Theos is and how he spoke and behaved and all that stuff. Oh my god, Eric.
Yeah, I'm getting destroyed right now.
Way to not rest.
I forgot about that.
You forgot about resting?
Well, I forgot that I'm like super fatigued right after the whole deal.
Yeah, that's another thing we didn't do very well. There's a lot of stuff I think at the beginning, to be honest, that we try to put off the beginning of the game until later in development, so it's easier to so it's sort of easier to use lessons we've learned. But there's a lot of stuff that we were trying to do narratively early on. It was hard to communicate things like your fatigue, the whispers, and all that stuff.
That's why I picked this first. This Phantom is too good. Just soloed those guys.
Hail and well met.
So here's a question. I've gotten several people to try pillars, but a lot of them have, quote, problems, unquote, in Gilded Vale, where they try to wander into the ruined temple with just 2 party members, and nearly all of them missed out on Adair. Would you do things differently now after the feedback? With Adair, it's we did try to do more and more stuff to really call attention to Adair. He's standing really close to where you're likely to go. Mm-hmm. He talks to you. If you look at the area map, he's actually labeled. All companions are always labeled, even when they're not in your party, on the area map.
I guess show them right now.
Yeah, so you can see Adair. I mean,
Adair and Aloth are right here.
We could have called them out in different colors or with different symbols. That might have helped. We could have used visual effects to draw more attention to them. The Temple of Aethys, I think the worst thing about the Temple of Aethys is really the density of spirits and shadows in them, which makes sense given the area. It was meant to be a little challenging. I think there's a sort of philosophical question to ask, like how early in the game do you want to start throwing optional things at the player that they can do but they're not required to do?
Recent
And the Temple of Aethys, you don't have to do it at all, really. Like, there's cool stuff down there, but you don't need to do it.
We'll need to make some inquiries first.
So I think I would probably
The
go a little
inestimable
easier on the
role
spirits
the well-being of
and
this
try to
village
draw more
is,
attention
I should warn you, stranger.
to Adair to
Here
make
in
sure that
Gilded
people
Vale, we
really
have a
definitely
special
absolutely
plate
get him.
His Lordship's wife is with
But
children
otherwise, I
of
do think there's kind of a philosophical thing where at some point early in the game, we want to introduce the player to the concept that there are certain areas that you can go to that they're going to be harder than
But if
you're not prepared for them when you first get there, and so you kind of have to level up or get more people or just use really kind of serious strategy and tactics to get through them.
Tolls. Let that be the last.
3. Gods have mercy.
It seems your arrival is ill-timed.
Do you guys think that a 3D game can ever fully replace isometric CRPGs without losing too much in the process? Well, I guess it depends on what you mean by 3D. Like, if you mean a 3D game that's still from this sort of perspective, I think that the Divinity games, like, they're great. Like, obviously they're not quite the same, but they're filling a very similar niche. If you mean kind of the more close third-person games that are more action-oriented, I don't think they're a direct replacement. I think you can have fun with both of them, but this style of game where it's really focused on the top-down, party-based stuff where you're seeing a lot of the environment from this viewpoint, there's a very specific appeal to this sort of game that I don't think you can quite replace with a close third-person game camera.
Were you looking for someone in that
Do you have a plan on making the
I could
difficulty curve
introduce
better in PoE 2? PoE starts pretty tough, but toward the end becomes fairly easy. I think I think we have more people to help with encounter tuning, and I think we have a lot more tools to tune difficulty overall. I think that there is a general challenge with balancing RPG combat the higher the levels get. The reason for that is that the mathematical gulf between characters gets wider. At low levels, there's only so much min-maxing you can do. As levels get higher and higher, you can min-max more and more, and it becomes more difficult to balance around the really skilled min-maxing players. So there's always a bit of a challenge there. You can do some tricks to kind of bring that stuff closer together, but part of the appeal to certain people is min-maxing. So if you blunt that too much, it gets frustrating because the joy that some people get out of it is like eking every teeny bonus out for every single character so they can smack the crap out of things. So I think we have better tools now. We have more people to sort of focus on encounter tuning. So I think we can do a better job of pacing combat difficulty over time in the future.
Not quite how I hope to get to know the neighbors.
Would Obsidian ever consider making another AAA game again, or are you happy doing what you're doing? Yeah, I think yes. I think Obsidian would like to do that. We're working currently on Armored Warfare, which is an enormous game with a really, really huge team. I mean, the Armored Warfare team is bigger than any other team that we've ever had. So much bigger than Fallout New Vegas, like almost twice as big as Fallout New Vegas. So, we have folks that can work on games like that. One of the things I do like about Obsidian is that because we are independent, we have a decent amount of flexibility over the types of games we work on and the sizes of teams that we have. So, for example, we have like the Pathfinder card game is about the smallest team we've ever had in terms of teams that have shipped a product here, which is really cool. But then we also have huge Armored Warfare teams. We also have teams the size of Pillars and Tyranny, which are closer to 20 to 30 people. And that mix of things is really good. But I think people would really enjoy working on another AAA title. That being said, I like working on teams that are about this size usually. New Vegas, that's the upper end of what I really like to work on, like about 70 people. But a 30-person team, I get a lot of exposure to what everyone's doing every day. I can talk to people a lot and see what they're working on. And it's easy for me to keep track of what's going on the team. It gets a lot harder once the team size gets above like 50 or 60 people. All of the backgrounds and maps are super nice, but you said you did some really weird things in Unity to construct them, making it unfriendly as a mod tool. Have you managed to make level creation any smoother, and is there any chance of more mod tools for the eventual PoE 2? Yeah, it's not so much that we did weird things in Unity. It's a complex process. So all of our levels, all the renders for our levels are constructed in Maya, which is a 3D tool, and everything is modeled and textured in there and lit in there, and then it is rendered through a renderer called Mental Ray. Sorry, it's rendered out of Mental Ray, and we've set up Mental Ray to spit out. We have 5 different maps, like sort of texture layers that we use for a variety of purposes in rendering the level, and that's where a lot of the complexity comes in. It's not so much about what we do in Unity, although there is some tricky stuff that we do there. It's more about how those levels are built in the first place so that you get all the right lighting information, the depth mapping, which is for occlusion, so that characters sort properly in the scene. And that's the stuff that is, it's pretty complicated. That being said, aside from levels, which are, it's pretty hard to see how modders could just jump in and start doing stuff like that. I think for the future, like there were things that we wished were easier and faster to iterate on, like our data formats are pretty, our data formats were just Unity's bundled data formats, and those are fairly difficult for regular old human beings to edit and put in the game. So things that we'd like to do in the future, at the bare minimum, is make those data formats much, much easier. In spite of my focus on balancing stuff, like I do want things to be balanced. I also don't care if people want to mod the game and change the balance of everything and change what attributes affects what stats and by how much. Like I don't care about any of that stuff. So I want people to be able to mod that stuff more easily. So I'd rather use data formats that are easier for people to, like XML, that are easier for people to get into. And I think there's other things we can do that can make it easier to get at stuff. Levels, though, I will say that's one area that it's not easy to really conceive of a way that would be easy to mod in the future.
17 and a half.
Are you ever surprised by what writers come up with for games, like in a, whoa, you're a lot more dark introspective than I thought kind of way? I am surprised by what our writers come up with. I generally have a lot of respect for our writers, though, so it's not usually like, oh, I didn't realize you were actually philosophical or introspective. Like, I already knew that about you. Usually what I'm surprised by is just some of the turns of phrase or the specific options they come up with. I think the thing that usually, like, responses that are very entertaining or they allow for really cool role-playing opportunities. Also things where if you do specific checks and they wind up as failures, like in a scripted interaction, if it results in some sort of catastrophe that's very funny, like all that stuff can be really memorable. It's really the same sort of stuff that I think players find memorable in a lot of cases. The more entertaining stuff, the things that are kind of, you know, you'd think, oh, I really wish I could do that now, and then it gave you the opportunity to do it in a really cool way. But yeah, we have a lot of really smart, good writers here. So I always expect them to come up with really good dialogue. It's usually the surprises come in the individual responses and how they portray individual characters. In my opinion, what really creates a successful narrative and a fulfilling journey for the player as far as storytelling? I think it depends on what the medium is and what the type of... Yeah, it depends on the medium and the genre. There are a lot of considerations there. For a game like Pillars of Eternity, I think it's important that as a role-playing game, because I come from a tabletop gaming background, and so a lot of times I want to make sure that players feel like there's a variety of reasons for them to be invested in the story and what's going on. They need to be compelled by the setting and the main plot, like the hook that's drawing them in. And they need to feel that their character can be something that they not only establish at the beginning of the game, like this is who I am coming into this world, but that character, along with the player, like they sort of change and evolve over time, and they grow in certain ways. I don't necessarily think it needs to be a hero's journey, but I do think people like the idea of you come into a game with a certain concept of what your character is, and you can be true to that while still feeling like the character can grow organically through how you develop them and express their ideas, how you choose to resolve quests, how you develop your relationships with your companions. And at the end of the game, I think it's important, well, throughout the game and also at the end of the game, I think it's important for the player to feel that they had an impact on the lives of the people around them, and whether that's factions or nations or individual people that they form relationships with. I think those are all very important, which is a lot of things, but those things are all very important for creating a story that players feel like they're really invested in and it feels very meaningful for them. What's up?
Oh, sorry. Sorry that if it was already asked, but what's a coxfither?
You would probably have to ask Carrie Patel what a coxfither is. It's a slur, obviously, and it's a lewd slur, probably referring to somebody's genitalia. Yeah, I believe Carrie came up with that term, and I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. Does Jorge Oscuro still work at Obsidian? Yes, he is still working. He worked on Pillars of Eternity 1 and The White March 1 and 2, and he's working with me on my current project. How did The Great Journey turn out for Jason Bright? Good question. All right, you got your boys.
Yeah, I'm trying to decide whether I should play like I'm just doing a smoke test or just actually like show people the game. But obviously, these people already know what this game is about.
No, the project is not Pillars of Eternity New Orleans. For PoE 2, would you consider adding an option allowing players to use Path of the Damned enemy stat increases with encounters from any difficulty setting? Yeah, I've heard a couple of people have requested splitting that stuff.
Sure.
I mean, sure. At a certain point, it's kind of like how many difficulty tuners and things do we want to support. It's both a question of making the game logic work that way, but then it also has to be tested too. So I really do like having a lot of different things that players can tweak and tune in terms of difficulty. Like we tried to put really a ton of options into Pillars so that players could tune the game as much as they wanted to. So yeah, I wouldn't object to saying like, hey, you get the stat increases but not the encounters, or it's the stat increases but it's the hard encounters, not the everybody in the entire world is pouring out after you. Whether or not we would do that in the future, I don't know, but I certainly don't think it's a bad idea. It just kind of comes down to how much stuff can we support and test.
How may I help?
Well, I don't know.
Hey, what?
What's going to be the deal with multiclassing in Pillars 2, and how are you going to balance it? What I'll say about multiclassing is that so I've been playing D&D for about 30 years. And so I've played it from basic, and I played first edition, second edition, third, 3.5, fourth. I haven't played fifth yet. For some reason, nobody here has asked me to be in their campaign. It's very depressing. There's like 3 campaigns going on that I learn about, and they're like, oh yeah, we've been playing for about a month. I'm like, thanks, assholes. Anywho, multiclassing, usually the problem is it's one of two things. Either specific multiclassing combinations are incredibly powerful, where it just seems like you're really just if you don't multiclass, you're kind of being nowhere near optimal. And the other problem is when certain multiclassing combinations mechanically are just really, really bad fundamentally. So for example, in 3E or 3.5, usually the casters, if you multiclass the casters, they really stink. Like if you just go like, hey dude, I'm gonna make a 5/5 cleric wizard, that is a bad character. And that's why they have prestige classes like the Mystic Theurge and stuff like that, because they allow you to get bonus spell casting levels on top of them. So I think the challenge with a multi-classing system is trying to find the sweet spot. You want the person to feel that they're getting a really nice amount of stuff from each class, but that the single class character still feels like they're very cool and specialized and they're getting something out of it. And that's a delicate balance. And you do have to do it kind of systemically across everything. So that's really the challenge. That being said, I think there are ways to do it. You just kind of, in my mind, it's just about recognizing that that's often the pitfall, is either characters that are incredibly weak or extraordinarily powerful, and just kind of figuring out how do we systemically make that more of a thing where they feel pretty darn strong without eclipsing the single class characters. Has the voice actor strike had any effect on your current projects? Not to the best of my knowledge.
What's up at Finitron?
Yeah, I enjoy classless games, but I kind of feel like Pillars is really more about having a class-based system. That's kind of just the vibe of the game, and I think it just fits more with the sort of the inspirational material that we're pulling from the Infinity Engine games. I think there's also an argument to be made that having characters that have more distinct kind of roles in a party-based game is beneficial for some players. Like just kind of knowing like, this is this guy's class and this is what they do and this is kind of the focus that they have. And if they want to veer off of that, they're sort of taking intentional steps to veer away from that. Speeding along, Eric's gathering a party of extraordinary magnitude.
That's right. I kind of don't want Kana because I'm already a chanter, but it's fine.
It is, but the
Well, also because he's kind of a tank chanter, sorta.
No. Excellent. I say believe.
My favorite ending in Pillars of Eternity is the ending you choose.
Oh. All right, let's give him some different stuff.
Is there anything specific you do to make sure the combat action in these games doesn't become a cluster F on the screen? Is that ever an issue? Yeah, it's an issue a lot. I mean, it's an issue in Pillars of Eternity, to be honest. There's a lot of things we can do. There's some stuff we've looked into for the future. So, for example, it's very easy. The way that the renderer works in Pillars of Eternity 1,
Following your lead.
without getting super technical, it's very easy for visual effects to blow out, where they just kind of like become this big mass of color that just wipes out all the other detail and everything in the screen. Usually when multiple effects are going on, but sometimes even a single effect going on can cause that to happen. So we've looked at how we can render visual effects in a way that is much easier to, it's much easier to tell what's going on when those effects are going on. They don't all stack on top of each other and just blow the screen out. I think making visual effects that are snappier, that don't linger for quite as long, that's very important. That's something we didn't do enough on Pillars 1 that we'd like to do moving forward. Also spacing. You can't always control spacing because players want to be able to get really close to the enemy if they want to pack people in. But working on default combat spacing, size of selection circles, weapon ranges, tuning those things, they're very, very tight in Pillars, which I think can lead to some of the fights feeling very cramped. But it's a delicate balancing act because if you space people out too much and you make the selection circles too big, navigation becomes an issue. So there's lots of stuff that we can do, I think, to help with readability. And there's a lot of lessons I think we learned on Pillars that we can apply to the future.
Yeah.
What's it like to work with Todd Howard? He's a really cool dude. Like I didn't actually interact with Todd Howard a ton on Fallout New Vegas, but every interaction I had with him, he's a really super cool guy. So the answer is good.
Sure.
Leave! You can't do this! This is our village!
I'm not playing,
The nine
so
have lived here
he's
almost
playing.
50
Yeah, so I'm
generations.
not answering the complex
We were here
questions.
long before
If
you
you watch my
came.
Fallout stream, you know I can't do both of those things at the same time. Actually, I can, but there's a third complicating factor, which is a fucking dog snoring in my ear nonstop. That's the point where I stopped being able to actually answer questions and play the game coherently. Also, I was sick. That didn't help.
They like their archers. Yeah.
Glowing sword.
You've talked about changes to interrupt concentration in a hypothetical sequel. Can you say anything more about that? Yeah, so interrupt and concentration are a very, I guess what I think I've said this before when I think you asked me about it, is they're more mushy feeling. Like if you're paying close attention, you can kind of see how the mechanics of interrupt and concentration work back and forth. Holy crap, Eric, what is going on?
Dude, Adair's getting wrecked.
Yikes. I think having a more discrete system where interrupts are more, it's not that everything interrupts, it's more like special attacks can interrupt and concentration is used as a sort of way to block an interrupt. I think something like that where it's more like you have concentration and interrupt can overpower it. I think something like that might work better. Interrupts I think can feel cool. I also think that, you know, we sort of erred on the side of making the, what are you doing, my man?
I'm doing what I can. I used to be really good at this game, and now.
For example, so in the Infinity Engine games, usually like if someone got interrupted, they would lose their current action, which would mean like a spell or a thing like that would also be lost. I was concerned that was too punitive in the base game. I don't know if it's really as big of a deal as I initially thought it was, so making it more of a, especially if it's less common, like if it's not just every other hit like is interrupting somebody. So I think making the interrupt and concentration mechanics more kind of distinctive and unique and more powerful but rarer, I think would be more, would be more interesting. So that would be what I would like to look at.
Those dazes. You can handle so many dazes. Playing a normal, guys.
Did crowdfunding add any unforeseen difficulties to the development of pillars? Yeah, I mean, there were a couple things that, so a lot of the stretch goals came up very quickly and they were funded very quickly.
Of course.
So why don't you just go outside? Can't you camp outside?
Yeah.
Maybe? Ooh, maybe you have to clear it first.
Yeah, I think this has to be cleared first.
Okay, well, rip.
We'll find out.
So there were things during the development, during the Kickstarter campaign where, so just to be clear, we didn't have any stretch goals planned and laid out when we started that because we thought maybe we'll hit 1.1 million by the end of the 30 days, or was it 30 days, 31 days? By the end of the campaign. And it was funded in 27 hours, and we were all there on Saturday going, so what are we going to do for stretch goals? And there were certain things we committed to that we did question at the time, like, is this actually, like, can we do X number of levels? Like, is there an upper limit to how many levels of a mega dungeon we should have? Is there an upper limit to the number of classes we should do? Should we really do 2 big cities? By the way, the answer to that question is no. We shouldn't do 2 big cities. So there's a lot of stuff where we were kind of on the fence about it. Some things worked out okay. There were certain things also that we thought we could do just fine, like the Stronghold. But then when it came to actually implementing it, there were logistical problems that made it very difficult. So for example, the Stronghold, we wanted to have a lot more actual content to it, not to have it be so mechanically heavy, but be more content driven. We just didn't have the area designers to do that stuff, but we had time for a programmer to work on stuff and system design to work on stuff. So that I don't think, like we couldn't have foreseen a lot of the problems with that, but there were other things like the second big city and the Stronghold, or I'm sorry, not the Stronghold, but the Mega Dungeon, where if we had erred a little more on the side of caution, it would have worked out better for us in the long run, but it came out okay. But there are certain things we look at and certainly say like, that could have been better. Knowing what you know about the Fallout New Vegas engine, how difficult would it be for modders to implement multiplayer functionality? I actually have no idea at all, I'm sorry. Yeah, like multiplayer was never really a focus for us with that engine, so I don't think we even looked at it at all.
Why are you just standing there?
You saw that dude complaining about a lack of ambiance and background activity stuff in cities on your forums the other day. Yep.
Yeah.
I'm assuming. I don't know if a question's coming or if you're asking, would we have more of that? Yeah, I totally understand that. I think that I can understand why people feel the cities don't have a whole lot of life to them. People's schedules are pretty limited. The AI is pretty limited in terms of behaviors. We don't have a ton of idle. Jeez Louise.
I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of idle and fidget animations of people. We had I don't want to say we had limited animation resources, but those animation resources were spread over a huge number of creatures because we made a zillion creatures. I think it's a fair criticism for looking at the cities and they don't really feel like there's a ton going on, and that the people aren't really engaged with life in the city. And that is something that I know that we can do better in the future and want to do better in the future. We want our cities to feel like people are actually have their daily routines, that they're going about their lives, and that if you just stop and look at a scene, there is a sense of life there. For as pretty as our environments are, there needs to be a sense of life that goes beyond just the static image. So that can come in the form of dynamic elements, cloth, all that cloth, trees, stuff that we tried to do in the first game that we didn't quite execute on. But the reason why we wanted to do things like dynamic trees and shrubs and things like that is because it makes the world feel more alive and reactive. And that also applies to characters, their schedules, their behavior. All that stuff just makes things feel more believable and lived in.
Just got so many disengage bonuses.
Is Pillars 2 going to address the mess that action speed mechanics in PoE? Yeah, so one of the most frustrating things about how speed was displayed to the player is that we couldn't really query the animations. I mean, this is a technical reason. We couldn't really query the animation system in Unity 4. So if we wanted to get attack times out and do math on them, we couldn't get it directly from the animation, which means we would have had to have entered it by hand or make an index list that we reference. And that seemed really, that made me nervous and a few other people nervous because we weren't sure how correct that information would be. It is frustrating. It's very frustrating, like I understand it. Like you want to really know, like don't tell me fast, like how many seconds and tenths of a second and how long is the recovery actually. And that's actually something you can see in Tyranny is that they used Unity 5 and they have more precise measurements of time. And that's totally something that I think is great in Tyranny and I would want to do in the future.
Everyone's hurting. Yeah, I did it, guys. Just had to lure them to my spot.
Yeah, we're not going to go back to rounds. It's I mean that's no.
As am I. If you should.
Yeah, I think it's totally reasonable to want it to be consistent and clear, and it's not in Pillars. So I think that's a fair criticism, and it's something we want to fix. Do I like players having influence on the larger scale politics of the world, like wars, imperialism, forms of government? Yeah, I mean, I think you want the player to feel like they have an impact on what's going on in the world. The scope of that obviously can change from being very local, small things to things on a much bigger scale. It kind of depends, I think, on the scope of fantasy that you like. The thing that I usually try to do, though, is even within a fantasy context, I think things should be kind of believable. Like one person running around with a sword, murdering a bunch of stuff, can't like fix all the social problems in the world. So even if you like put a person in charge of something, like there's unintended consequences of that, and that's something that we certainly tried to do in Fallout New Vegas, and also we tried to do with the endings of Pillars. Is that there are certain things that work out the way that you expect them to, but you can't control everything. And so sometimes you get most of what you want, but then you get some side effects where you're like, whoops, that's not really what I wanted to have happen, but things are beyond your control. Greatly appreciate that in Pillars, level scaling is completely optional. If you decide to use some level of scaling in the sequel, we'll also be able to turn it off. Yes, I think that level scaling should be completely optional. Also, I think it should be better than it was in Pillars 1. if we do have level scaling, I would want it to be a little more robust, and it was kind of, in some ways, hacked in
New
with White
orders,
March,
Lieutenant.
and it didn't quite work out
Ready
the
your
way
squad.
that we would have wanted it to.
Yeah.
This seems to be the perfect time to ask, were Shadows and Phantoms designed specifically to be a counter to spellcasters, considering how ruthless they are in combat against spellcasters? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they are specifically trying to target spellcasters, and
Take those farmers by surprise.
and that's
Almost
another
time.
place where, like,
Don't
maybe they
worry,
shouldn't have been
I'll
introduced
trust
quite
you.
as early as they were, because you get a tank, and you get a wizard, and you don't really even get a chance to, like, get your tank to do the good tank stuff, because you go in with a dare and you're like, I'm locking this shit down. Like, he is going to block all these dudes, and then you have guys teleporting behind him and attacking Aloth. So that was probably not the way to introduce those guys. They probably should have been introduced in a different context, probably later in the game. Not asking for a 30-minute technical answer, but can you clarify how background asset streaming works in the Pillars engine, and if load speed is likely to improve as your engineers gain more experience with Unity? Well, I'll give you the short answer. Yes, it can improve a great deal. It can be a lot better. Nobody likes the loading speeds in Pillars 1. There's nobody at Obsidian that's like, I thought they were pretty much fine. Like, you know, we all look at it and go like, oh, God, this, especially toward the late game, it gets really, really slow. There is a lot of stuff that can be better about it. Yes, it can be improved. Let me just say it can be improved a lot.
How may I help?
Yeah.
I'll see what I can find.
What is the time?
It's 10 till.
Okay.
Pillars reviewed incredibly well. How much attention do you guys pay to that? Do you care when publications give you praise, or are you only looking for the player base to be happy? Well, as the bottom line is that the players have to be happy, but the fact of the matter is that if we don't get good reviews, people will assume the game sucks. So, as much as I'd like to say, like, the critics can think what they think as long as the players are happy, but that, like, one, critics influence player perception too. So if they hear a bunch of people saying that this game sucks, it will, even people who haven't played the game will be like, oh, that game, yeah, it's terrible. All these reviews said it was garbage. And it affects our sales. Like, it really has a huge impact on our sales. So as much as I would like to say, like, we don't give a shit about what the Metacritic says, it affects our viability moving forward, and the audience that we can reach with it. So at the end of the day, though, like, I just want players to be happy, and there's a limit to that, though. Like, not everybody's going to be happy with any game that you make. So as much to the extent that we can make players happy, I do want them to be satisfied with the game. It is ultimately much more important that they're happy with it than an individual critic, or critics as a whole are happy with it. But it has to get good reviews for people to look into buying it.
Would they be solved? Yeah.
If I ever did a tactics spin-off, would it be shit for consoles and gamepads? I don't know. I mean, it is really a theoretical thing. I forgot that secret door was there.
Yeah, if you don't have enough mechanics,
Yeah.
just boom.
I do think, though, that while the enhanced editions are really cool on tablet, like I mean like Baldur's Gate and Icewind Dale and BG2, the enhanced editions on tablets are very cool. I still think it's a little easier to play them on a keyboard and mouse, whereas a tactics style game that's turn-based, I think, is much friendlier to something like a tablet or a console, which is why Wasteland 2, it's much easier to see a game like Wasteland 2 on a console than Pillars. So personally, I would say, like, yeah, if you can, put it on those platforms just because it can reach more people. And if the game isn't compromised by doing that, then great.
Mayor Wald isn't here, and he isn't fooled. He has sent for no commas. Be gone, deceiving spirit.
Was the animacy trial at the end of the Act 2, I'm assuming, intended to be a bit more open? It seemed a bit heavy-handed. That's something that in retrospect we talked about, and I do think that there are ways that we could have allowed the trial to turn out differently that would have made the player feel like they had more agency in how the trial was resolved, that wouldn't have made the story worse. In fact, I think it would have made the story better because the player would have felt like, oh, like I actually made that change in a significant way. So that's something that Aarik and I had talked about, and I think there were better ways that we could have handled that. And I also think that's something that we recognized is we kind of abandoned those Act 2 factions right as you're kind of really getting into them. Like you form your alliance in Act 2 in Defiance Bay, and then you have the trial and the riots and all that stuff, and then you go away and you never really hear from those factions again, which is kind of a shame. So I think having factions be more involved over the course of a story is something that that was sort of a missed opportunity for us there. And I think also the trial, like I said, there's a lot of cool stuff that happens during the trial, but ultimately it always ends the same way. So I think there's other stuff we could have done with that.
Yeah, I'm gonna lose this fight because I didn't rest. So.
Cool.
But we're almost out of time, everybody. So thank you all for joining us.
Thanks.
Thanks, Josh, for hanging out with us.
No problem.
And answering all these questions. I do want to throw in though that we love fan art.
Yes.
And we get a lot of, getting fan art is super awesome. And if you make some amazing work, they go up on the wall behind us, which you can see behind us. And then you guys can see right now, Fang Mitch made a super kawaii owl. And there's a deer from Gala with her Watcher character hanging out with a deer. Headstrom Project. This is a Road Warrior inspired Aloth. It's super awesome. This was for our Inktober event. And then James W. Kane, you can follow him on Twitter. He did that sculpt of Palagina. It's super awesome, which we do have hanging off to the side. You can't see.
Yep.
And then I love this Grieving Mother from Living Dead, aka super awesome. So
Very
follow
cool.
these guys. If you guys have fan art, please tweet it to us, and we just love seeing this stuff, and we love seeing you guys passionate, and we love seeing your art. Super cute, Haravius. Super awesome.
Oh, with the cat, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. That's always good. Kittens in a dare.
Mm-hmm. So thank you guys. Oh yeah, this one super Sagani. Thank you very much, everyone. This ends our first installment of this. So we shall return at a later date. We'll have that announced later. Thank you guys very much, and we'll see you next time. But don't forget, at 7 p.m. in a couple hours, Obsidian Plays will be going virtual. Come back in 2 hours, and we'll see you guys then. All right, take care, guys.
See you.